do this, you fabulous people. All right, and we're recording. Fantastic. All right, we'll let everybody jump in here. This is great. Look at it populate. It gets so exciting when you watch the bottom and you just see everybody entering. 21, 24. Oh, this is so exciting.
I'll wait for it to pause, and then
Yep.
We can't
start it.
Oh wow, it's like a theater with the dark audience,
right? Oh. Rachel, I'm sorry. Should we have all worn like summer gear? I wasn't thinking like tropical shirt.
Right now that this looks a little bit more like Men in Black.
It's classic. It's classic.
It's not the worst thing that ever happened.
All right, we'll give it one more minute and then we'll jump in and get the party started. Welcome everyone, and as you're joining, please feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself so we can see you. Who are you? What district do you work in? What's your role? Anything that you want to share with us, we are happy to see. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please feel free to start the chat.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the second of a three-part series from the Connecticut Reading Association. Today we have Dr. Rachael Gabriel. She'll be doing Summer Reading Swimsuit Edition, and Jen will introduce her in a moment. Next week on Tuesday, June 16th from 8 to 9, we have a rescheduled Kate and Maggie Roberts, who will also be doing a summer-themed 1-hour free Zoom workshop through Connecticut Reading Association. So Jen, your introductions?
All right. Well, thanks guys. Welcome to a nice Thursday night. I know it's a very stressful time of year, but a very exciting time of year, and usually a very celebratory season for all of us who are in a school district. So I hope the end of your year is going as well as it possibly can be at this time. Obviously it's a little different. We did a little reverse parade today in my district. So, I hope you're still getting to do some of those fun celebratory things to wrap up the school year with your students, and we'll look forward to whatever the future may hold. So you probably know that due to everything that's going on, the CRA was trying to think of more creative options to support educators around the state and to really consider what people need now. And this workshop with Dr. Rachael Gabriel from UConn is so timely, because if you're anything like me, I am both thinking about summer reading and ways that we can support getting actual books in the hands of kids to read this summer and keep that going, as we always, that's always something that we struggle with, and to provide that level of equity for all of our students, it's something that we struggle with. And I too am also thinking about my summer, I don't know about diet, my summer look, I guess, once I leave the house and see other people in society. So I'm so thankful that Rachael Gabriel is here. She is just outstanding. Brief bio here to get you acquainted if you're not already familiar with Dr. Gabriel's work. She's an associate professor of literacy education at UConn. She's the author of so many terrific and amazing things, over 40 articles, the author or editor of 5 books for literacy teachers, leaders, education researchers. She's on editorial boards. She is just everywhere. So thank you so much for Rachael. I know how busy you are right now as well. I just really appreciate your time tonight, and I know we have so much to learn from you. So thank you. I will turn it over to you, and I will be the moderator this evening. So please, everyone in the audience, we want to be as interactive as possible. I hope Rachael doesn't mind if I interject intermittently with pertinent questions, and I'll try and structure those in a meaningful order for everybody. So please, as you're in the Zoom chat and you're introducing yourself, please feel free to pose questions or concerns at any time so that we can address them. All right, Dr. Gabriel, thank you. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, sweet. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. am in my summer gear. I even got my hair wet, so it would be like I came right in from the pool. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to see so many people signing on. This is way past my bedtime in Corona land, so like, I'm kidding, but I'm impressed that this is what you're doing with your Thursday evening. Thank you for doing that. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to share my screen and share some thoughts with you. In the beginning, I'm going to just ask you to think along with me about some things I've been thinking about and what they might mean for summer reading and the big questions that we have for that. And then I'm going to share some things that I have learned and some things that I know from reading lots of research about this. And then see what you're thinking. See what you're thinking about summer reading in your kids. So here we go. The host needs to enable sharing. Hello. Great.
Efforting on that. All good. I know. Happy almost summer. I know. Everyone's in like a good mood tonight. Come on. Thursday night, what would you rather be doing? Nothing? Nothing.
You should be all set now.
Nothing but this. Spending time with friends right here, right now. Gorgeous. Do you see what I see? Probably.
That's fantastic.
Okay. Look, it's like a pool, you guys. Exactly. Thanks for having me, Jen, NCRA. All right. It's swimsuit season and summer reading season. Both happen at the same time. They have a lot in common. And one of the things they have in common is that we all know what we should do in order to get ready for swimsuit season and summer reading season. But doing those things can be really, really difficult. So we're going to be juxtaposing these two things all evening and seeing what comes out of it. All right. When it comes to swimsuit season, just bear with me for a second here. There's a basic law of thermodynamics. Nobody gets around it. It doesn't matter who you are or what's going on for you. The law of thermodynamics still applies one way or another. And it goes like this. Energy in minus energy out is changes in body stores. That's basically all there is to that. The law of reading dynamics, if you want to know it in Latin, I put it in there because I knew that there might be some nerds here. Basically, time spent in engaged literacy activities equals skill practice, language exposure, confidence, desire, and then you get reading growth. So it's like that simple. And there's really literally no way around it. If you are engaged in reading, writing, and talking about text, you get more practice and exposure and confidence and desire, and then you get reading growth. There's nothing really beyond the simple equation, but also that simple equation is not so simple. So we know how to do it. Get kids books that they can and want to read, have them read them, and then they grow. And over the summer, make sure they have lots of access to books that they can and want to read, and then they'll read them, and then they'll grow. Like, it's actually that simple. This whole workshop is over. Thank you for signing on. We'll see you next time. It's simple, but it still is really hard to get each part of that equation balanced and in gear. It's still really hard. Otherwise, things would look a lot different. As with weight loss, there are multiple interdependent factors. This is a infographic of some of them if we're thinking about energy balance. And I made it small so that you couldn't really read it easily, because what you should see there is like a whole bunch of gobbledygook. It's simple enough to say energy in, energy out, but it's really difficult when you think about all the things that impact energy in and all the things that mediate energy out. And so in both cases, we need, for a multiple interdependent factors situation, we need a multi-pronged individualized formula for success. So that's what we're going to be thinking about, but I'm going to extend the metaphor even a little bit farther. Those of you who know me have seen this before. I don't leave home without it, by which I mean I very rarely talk to a group without it. So if you have heard it before, you can sing along. And if you're new to me and to these ideas, welcome. I'm glad you're here. The basic idea here is that we've got a snowball cycle of reading success that can easily turn into a snowball cycle of reading failure. And this is a simple version of what makes the law of reading dynamics complicated. It should just be, if they read, and they're reading something they can read and want to read, we call that engaged reading, they'll grow. But there's also these interesting little pathways, like if they write, they also grow. If they talk about things that they're reading, they also grow. If they don't do a lot of reading, but they do a lot of writing, they grow in both. And so this can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And this is a simple version of what might be happening. One thing that might happen is that they are interested in, engaged in literate activities, which gives them confidence to do it, so they spend more time doing it, and that gives them more practice recognizing words, which allows them to be exposed to more words and figure out what they mean. And that makes it so that they can read fast and smooth enough to understand, and if they understand, they might be interested in it. If they're interested, they might feel good about it. If they feel good about it, they will spend more time doing it, which means more practice and more exposure, so they can do it fast and smooth enough to understand. And if they understand, they like it and feel good about it and spend time doing it, so they get more practice, more exposure, and they do it fast and smooth enough to understand. But you can also get kinked up and forced in the other direction. So it becomes a cycle of reading failure pretty quickly. So say you go home with a book of a stack of 10 books on your nightstand for the whole summer, and you're so excited to read them because 10 is 4 more than the recommended amount of 6 books, and you're going to be a rock star reader, and you're so excited and so confident, and the first page has a bunch of words that you don't recognize, and you don't know what you're reading at the top of the page by the time you get to the bottom of the page, so your confidence is shot and you close the book. So you spend a little bit less time reading, which means you have less practice, more exposure, and you don't read fast and smooth enough to understand that book, and so you don't understand it and you don't like it and you don't really want to open it up again. Let's forget that one and open the next one, maybe. But also there's Netflix, so maybe not. Now that's just confidence. We could also get kinked up in time. There's lots of things that are competing for our time and attention. You could get kinked up in recognizing words, or you could get kinked up in reading them fast and smooth enough to understand. You could even get kinked up saying, well, I understand all these words, but this book is actually way more mature than I am, and it's totally beyond me why this is interesting or important, so I don't really like it. There are lots of reasons why, even if you have the book in your hands and you have the time to read it, you don't necessarily make it all the way through to create that put the books in, get the growth out, simple equation. So that's one simple way of thinking about it. A slightly more accurate way of thinking about it is that it's not just, let's count them, 8 factors that are interdependent, feeding each other in both directions. It's actually more like 24. And if we wanted to be serious about it, we could extend this so it doesn't fit on any kind of slide and think about it as a huge web of factors that are interdependent, and that changing any one of them would make a difference, but also could make a problem. And if that's the case, then having a 1-factor summer reading program, for example, if you read, you get a prize, 1 factor, doesn't really make sense. Because just like if you're trying to change your body shape, there are a lot of factors. The obvious ones that we know about are energy and energy out in the form of calories versus exercise, but there's also things like sleep, like hormones, like genetics, like health, like stress, like all these things that would complicate that simple formula, so that that formula is almost not worth thinking about in many situations. And so if we were going to think about swimsuit season and say, all right, everybody, let's just drink rice water the whole time. First of all, we would have a really big health problem on our hands. And second of all, it wouldn't work. I'm reading City of Girls right now by Elizabeth Gilbert, by the way, and one of the actresses is like, I'll fit into my dress, I'll just drink rice water for the whole day before the performance. It doesn't work. In fact, it often backfires, but it's a simple misunderstanding of the idea that, like, if you energy in, energy out, you'll lose weight, it'll be simple and easy and great. Well, that's true if you zoom way out. Energy, like engaged reading experiences, comes in many forms and is mediated in many ways. And energy out, in the form of reading practice and exposure, comes in many forms and is mediated in many ways. And so if we are designing summer reading programs that are going to catch kids where they are and say, hey, we've got something that supports multiple aspects of this kind of complicated interdependent system, those summer reading programs have to be simple enough to understand, yes, but they also have to manage a couple of pieces of the reading experience. And so we're going to think about this basically as one big central question. When it comes to summer reading, how do we, and you can fill in the blank with your favorite, encourage, cajole, force, require, support, how do we get students to? And then you can think about the rest of it however you want. Basically, it's how do we get them to read more over the summer, but we also can frame this as how do we get them to do what's good for them, do what they know is right, follow our directions, fall in love with reading, work on their skills, not lose ground. You can fill in the blank. And in fact, I would like you to fill in the blank. If you have a scratch piece of paper somewhere, you will not need to turn this in. It's not homework or a quiz. Fill in the blank for yourself for a moment. When you think about summer reading, what goes in the first space, blank? Yes, fill in the blank. What goes in the first blank? And what goes in the second blank for you and your current students? And chat it to us so we can see them. The reason to think about this in all the different ways that we might be thinking about it is to recognize that we're setting up different scenarios depending on what we put in space 1 and space 2. If it's about encouragement, we're going to design systems that support things like confidence and interest. If it's about requirement, we're going to support things like counting, keeping track. If it's about making sure, forcing even, kids to do this because we know it's good for them, it might be about making it as small and easy as possible in only 10 minutes a day with only 10 pages a night. All you have to do is the bare minimum. And similarly, on the other end, when we think about the second space, what are we trying to get kids to do? To enjoy, to spend time, to log hours, to log pages, to read in order to learn something? When we do our summer reading programs, what are we doing them for?
All right, well, we've got a lot of chatter here happening here, Rachel. And it seems pretty, really positive and like-minded. The encourage, the inspire, a lot of choice, things like that. And so I also positioned not only like ideally, what are we going with, but what does your district summer reading program look like this year? Is it the same as what you answered to your first question? Yeah, encourage, fall in love with reading, find their passion. We want them to be able to maintain that. Awesome, great comments. Oh, good question, Adrian. How do we enable students to read more over the summer, right? So if it's not required and oh yeah, and some districts are not doing a lot of summer reading just because of the situation. So I definitely see that across the state. How do we encourage students to fall in love with reading over the summer? Love it, Sarah, love it. All right, the chat is busy, I tell you.
All right, busy chatterers. Thank you for putting your chats in there, and thank you for being with me in this question. Basically, what I'm wondering about is why do we care in the first place? There's all these statistics out there about how reading over the summer stems summer learning loss. Some of you know how I feel about talking about summer learning loss, the way that we talk about summer learning loss. But summer reading also is just about kind of continuing and extending what you do during the year. And if you have spent your year thinking about building a community of readers and trying to create and reinforce reading habits, you just sort of hope that those habits sustain over the course of the summer. But many summer reading programs either don't exist anymore or measure and organize the reading activity in a way that doesn't really match what we actually care about with reading over the summer. So I want you to think about for yourself, why do you care in the first place whether kids read over the summer or not? And then I'd like you to think a little bit along with me as we go through the next couple of slides about whether the structures that support or enable or require students to be reading this summer mirror or match why you care in the first place. So an example of that might be, if you just want them to love reading, then that structure might be all about exposing them to really interesting texts and ensuring they have access to them, and exposing them to lots of really cool reasons to use reading for important things in their lives. And so it would be a little bit about the books that are out there and getting them excited about things that they actually will have access to. And a lot about thinking about the role of reading in their life and what it lets them do, and inviting them into those spaces. If on the other hand, you're thinking more about the fact that, you know, kids have been home for a long time, there is a lot of content that was not covered that we had planned to cover. We are concerned that there are going to be differences in levels and differences in skill and differences in fluency and exposure and practice. And we would like those differences to be as small as possible. And so you really want kids to log some minutes. You want them to get out there and do their exercises. You want them to stay in shape, essentially. There is absolutely a reason to believe that that matters. And so you might be thinking about structuring a system for your own students or the students in your school or your district that encourages them to make it a daily habit, whether they like it or not. Brush your teeth, not because it's super fun and enjoyable, but because you must do it every single day. And you may be in the camp of saying, we're going to scientifically prove how many minutes you have to read or how many books you'll need to finish to do sort of the bare minimum, and that will help you out. So we're going to think about why exactly we want our kids to read, and that answer can and should vary by the community you're a part of, by the year. It's leap year, guys. That's why it's so weird. And also by age and by your role and by lots of things. So I don't expect people to have the same answer to this, and there isn't a right or wrong answer to it. The only wrong thing is if your intention doesn't match your structure. So thinking about this, I want to take us back to the idea that summer reading programs are a whole lot like getting in shape for your swimsuit programs, in that they basically answer the same core question. How do we get people to do something that's good for them, that they know they should do, that they should enjoy? You should enjoy exercise and healthy eating. It's good. It really, I mean, like, you're supposed to like it, right? And even if you don't like it, you should do it whether you like it or not. And whether you do it is totally mediated by by that I mean it's changed by or filtered through your culture, your access, your interest, your skill, your motivation, your community, your engagement. It's filtered through a lot of things, whether you exercise or whether you read or what you consider healthy or nutritious eating.
Dr. Gabriel, can I jump back? We have a few really good questions, and one of which is really, what is your opinion on summer reading loss or summer learning loss in general? I know you were alluding to that, so we want to know.
So I recently wrote an op-ed. I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post about the way that I think we are positioning kids in a deficit lens by talking about all of the loss. Now, COVID has caused a tremendous amount of loss on a personal and social level, loss of lives, loss of family members, loss of expectations and hopes and experiences and freedom and time. There is a tremendous amount of loss associated with this time for people. Students are not losing learning. We can't stop them from learning. They're learning all the time. There's basically like a COVID curriculum. They're learning how to exist in a world that nobody planned for them. They're learning how to engage in schooling online, just like we're learning how to provide it for them. They're learning how to navigate living with their family 24/7, just like we are navigating living with or without them 24/7. Everybody, we can't stop them from learning. And they also are engaged in lots of activities that get put down and made to seem like they are not important and are in fact moving kids backwards or having them backslide in their skills or behaviors. For example, texting, which is a form of literate communication. Being online, which is a form of literacy too. And they may or may not have strong alignment with academic forms of literacy that get tested and monitored, but they certainly develop literacy skills and communication skills and some of the things that are really important for students as citizens and people who can engage in the world right now. Some of the most important things that are happening right now are happening on and because of social media. And so students' ability to engage with that is like real important, and it wasn't in the standards. So when people talk about what is lost right now, we can talk about the feelings of loss, but we can't talk about children as if they have not learned or as if they have lost ground. They've gained in things we didn't plan. They haven't covered, by which I mean they haven't been exposed to some things that we did plan. But in some ways, we can't know and we'll never be able to measure everything they've learned. And if they come back and we say, all right, welcome back from all this time of loss, which is loss on a lot of levels, and assume that they don't know things and assume that they have like atrophied all of their important skills and assume that they need remediation instead of enrichment, instead of acceleration, we're going to provide the kind of instruction that feels like catch-up and that feels like harried and urgent instead of the kind of instruction that feels like enrichment. And the kids that have gone home to places that are like wired with super powered internet and that as soon as travel restrictions are lifted are flying around the world having wonderful vacations and nobody's going to camp this summer, but their homes are basically like their own personal camps because they already have their own personal pool and they have their own personal gym and they have their own personal, in other words, the kids that have a lot of things in terms of socioeconomic access, teachers are going to assume that they didn't lose anything. And we're going to pick up where we left off and we're going to give them really interesting, engaging, personalized instruction. But kids that have less access to those sorts of things are going to come back with real stories and experiences of loss. And if we assume that they haven't learned anything either, we provide them with catch-up instruction instead of interesting, enriching, individualized instruction, we're going to make sure that we totally exacerbate those gaps. So summer learning loss is measurable in that the way we test academic skills at the end of the year and the way we test it in the fall shows a difference. And that difference actually can account for the entire achievement gap in some studies up through 4th grade. So what is lost over summers equals the distance between cohorts of different socioeconomic status by the time they're 4th graders, which means if we didn't have that distance, we wouldn't necessarily have to have an achievement gap at that point mathematically. However, what we're measuring there isn't what students know or are learning, because students know and are learning lots of things that we don't measure. What we're measuring is whether what they learn over the summer counts in school or not. And what counts in school or not is set by white, upper middle class, mostly men, who create tests. So kids don't lose learning. They are always learning, whether we like it or not. Sometimes in spite of what we ask them to learn, they are learning something all the time. It may or may not show up on the tests that we give them. And so when we talk about loss, kids have lost a lot, but they haven't lost their intelligence, and they haven't lost their potential, and they haven't lost their curiosity, and they haven't lost their inherent value as human beings who are capable of learning and thinking and doing really great things with reading and writing. And so when we think about the summer as a time where there is potential for growth, I'm with you 100,000% of the way. If we think about the summer as a time where kids are losing things, we have to think about what exactly we think they're losing and whether those things were important in the first place and what it might mean for them to hold on to them. So that's where we are in this conversation. What else, Jen?
That was amazing. I'm sorry, I just need a moment to like digest all of it. And I know somebody had asked if this is being recorded and if we can find it again, because I kind of need to listen to that a few times over to glean more out of everything that you just said. And that was so profound and important. And I think it's really important to also share that with our colleagues because, it's not just a reading thing, but everything that we're thinking about, with distance learning and going back in the fall and that whole deficit mindset and how that will really put us at a disadvantage if we align our practices with that philosophy come September. So that was amazing. And yes, this is being recorded and will be on our website and YouTube channel in just a couple of days. It just takes us a little turnaround time. But I want to just steal that snippet and play it to all of my colleagues several times over. So thank you. One of the other questions that did come up, and you might be addressing this further on in the presentation, is just how do we, because they're kids, how do we engage parents and families in instilling that love of learning and supporting the family network over the summer?
Yeah, right on. That will come up, and if you haven't heard enough about it in about 10 minutes, please nudge again. So let's go there a little bit. I'm going to show you, I think. Yep. I am going to show you a bunch of ads that show up on my Facebook page. This is just embarrassing. But anyway, I'm going to show you a bunch of ads that show up on my Facebook page. I think because I'm a middle-aged woman, I'm the target demographic for lots and lots of diet and exercise programs. And so I just started taking screenshots of the advertisements for them because I think that they carry within them some interesting rhetorical features, but get over the interest for a second with me. I think they carry within them some examples of what we do want to do when we're creating structures for summer reading programs and some examples of what we really don't want to do. And so I want to just run through a few examples and talk about a few things that I noticed, but I also want to start with a trigger warning because I realize that the diet and exercise industry is responsible for a great deal of trauma and disorder and pain in our society. And that's looking at a bunch of ads for diet and exercise programs. And many of them have, what I would consider graphic images of people in them, in swimsuits. Is not a comfortable place for everybody to be. And it's not a comfortable thing for everybody to look at. And if you're in a place in your personal journey where this is not going to do you any favors, turn the camera off and just listen. And if you're okay, come along with us. All right, so one of the things that we see is people saying, hey, there's all this research and all this science behind it. We're going to make it super simple for you. It's only going to take 30 days. It's scientifically proven. And the reason that you've had so much trouble with this before is something that you didn't even know existed. And I am going to help you out with it. So we can sort of say, oh, I can see that. All it's going to take is a certain number of books. And research and science says if you read this number of books, you're going to be totally fine. We know it's not true. And sometimes it makes sense because it's motivating to make the goal seem small. Sometimes it makes sense to say, hey guys, all you've got to do is read 4 to 6 books. That's it. Because research and science say that really all you need is 4 to 6 books. And whatever your reading level is depends, demonstrates what that means. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, right, but if I have a first grader, they can read 4 to 6 books in a sitting because those books are 12 pages long. And then they're going to what? Read them over and over again? Are we done now? Now, numbers wise, it's 4 to 6 books at your level, but in reality, that doesn't work, which is sort of numbers wise, you really maybe only need 30 days to have a physique transformation. But if you've ever tried to have a physique transformation in 30 days, that's a big fat lie. We also sometimes see guilt in promises. And this is where we need to be careful, especially about the messages that we send families. Families get guilted into doing things for their kids often. If you joined 3 weeks ago, your results would be visible by now. Households that own more books have smarter kids that get into better colleges than households that own fewer books. By the numbers, maybe, although research is mixed on that. It's not really about whether you own the books or not. It's about whether students have access to text. And by the way, the text doesn't have to come as a book. It doesn't even have to come as an ebook. Your brain doesn't really know the difference. If we're thinking about creating the neurological structures that support literacy development, we need written language. Students can write their own. As long as they are exposed to new language and are incorporating that into their writing is always at their level, which is why people have taught themselves to read in certain circumstances. This is extreme. We don't need our kids to teach them to read. We love to be there for them so that we can teach them to read, although many of them learn because of their friends more than they learn because of us, which is something we're going to get to in a second. But we don't have to guilt families into thinking, if you didn't force your kids to read 20 minutes, it's on you, it's your fault. Or if you don't own enough books in your home, it's on you, it's your fault. Because also, those are false promises. If I buy a whole set of encyclopedias, my kid is not going to be any better reader, just because I own that many books in my house. Here's a good one. This 30-day challenge will blow your mind and transform your body. That means, these are sort of like the over-promising, right? If kids read over the summer, they increase achievement and they increase grades and they increase the likelihood they're going to graduate from high school and they increase the likelihood they're going to go to college and a good college and they increase the likelihood of a career and they decrease the likelihood that they're going to prison. Now, we can do all of those calculations statistically. They exist. And if you start Googling for infographics about summer reading, you don't get summer reading, you get summer learning loss, and you get the school to prison pipeline. Now, that's over-promising. Reading books is not going to save them necessarily, although there are many times in my life and in the lives of people I care about where a book was a saving grace. Reading books is going to create potential and capitalize on existing potential for learning and for academic achievement. Notice I'm saying reading books, not reading, because reading books is more likely to translate to the kinds of tests that kids get when they get back to school, not necessarily to greater literacy development. Reading comics is also a great way to develop literacy. Reading the newspaper is also a great way to develop literacy. Reading Twitter and Facebook and Instagram are also really great ways to develop literacy. They may or may not help when students try to take a reading test when they get back to school. So going back to what you think you're doing with summer reading, are you developing literate humans who love reading, who feel confident, who like to write? Or are you developing people who will score well on the reading test? They may not be the same thing. We also often find this idea. There is magic. It only takes minutes as long as you're doing the right thing. And what's hilarious to me about the workout video thing is there's like the 7-minute video, the scientific 7-minute workout that was in the New York Times and reappears every year until they came out with the scientific 8-minute workout. And I think that this happened because there was a scientific 1-minute workout. And so if you put them together, you get, do you see what I'm saying? We have all these, you've seen it. I've had it in most of my PowerPoints of my life, that chart from Anderson, Wilson, and Fielding from 1988 that has like minutes of reading, words read per year. And that whole like, what's that called when the line goes up? Exponential growth curve, where kids that read more words and then they read better. Well, that's true mathematically. But it's not because their eyes looked at print on the page. It's because they read and understood that print and thought it was interesting and read and understood some more and probably talked about it and probably wrote about it. Now, when we measure, we're only measuring and guessing about words per minute and minutes per day. But there's no magic in the minutes. It isn't about 20 minutes. 19 minutes was fine. 22 minutes was not necessarily better. The experience of engaged reading something you can read, that you want to read, and understanding it enough where you would like to pick it up again, that's the gold. And it doesn't actually get measured in minutes. It gets measured in love. No. I was just having a 525,600 minutes thing going in my head.
I thought you were about to start singing Rent. I was okay with it, but.
Did anybody else have that going? Okay, yeah. So we can measure it from the outside in minutes, but that's not actually the difference. Similarly, we can do it because, and actually, okay, so one of the ways that we know that scientifically is that scientifically, An 8th grader and a 4th grader should have very different amounts of reading practice because they've been alive for different amounts of time and they've been in school for different amounts of time. And so theoretically, an 8th grader has had a lot more time on task than a 4th grader. But an engaged 4th grader, that means one who enjoys reading and would like to keep reading, often is higher achieving than a disengaged 8th grader. And it's not about the minutes. It's about the engagement. Uh-oh. All right, here's the last one. Anyone can do it. Now that's true, except for the people that can't do it. Anyone can develop literacy over the summer. Not everyone can read the book that is assigned for 9th grade and understand it and enjoy it and write an essay about it by the end of the summer in a reasonable amount of time that also lets them do other things. So this is a old school. It looks like an email. It looks like old weird fonts. And so it's sort of trying to keep it simple and say like, listen, a mom of 46 years old with lots of kids, just like somebody who struggled for over a decade, still figured out how to make enormous amounts of growth, or in this case, loss, in like 5 seconds flat. And everything got better for them in their lives. Well, these are ridiculous magic stories. There is some magic to summer reading, but it's not magic that like, you know, there's a secret trick to it and some people know the trick and some people don't. Creating a world where some people know the trick and some people don't is really good if you want to sell your reading product or your tutoring services. But it's really bad if you care about equity and achievement. Last one. This is what I mean by a graphic image. Nobody understands you except for me. I am the one who can design a perfect reading program for you. Every other reading program out there is a mess. This is not often found. I love that it's called 90daybikini-plan.com, but anyway, this is not often found in school and district reading programs, but it is very often found in reading programs that are sold on the computer. So if you buy this service, if you buy this subscription, if you subscribe to this thing that sends you books or this person who tutors your kid, nobody has understood your kid, but I will, and I will make sure that they get exactly what they need, hyping up the individualizing. And that was why nothing worked for you before, because nobody understands you, only me. Which is another version of everybody else is lying except for me. You want to keep your eye out for these because they are predatory. And also these ladies are a little scary looking, but mostly there are a lot of predatory programs on the internet. Some of them are offering free things now because of COVID, but in a minute they're not going to be free anymore. And so they might be nice for the minute, but if they want to stay in business, they won't be in a month. And then there's also dibbles. There's 4 kinds of readers. There's 4 levels of reading. You need to know this one simple thing and I will measure it for you. And the only reason that you didn't do well with last year's summer reading or you don't consider yourself a good reader is because nobody measured you correctly. Let's measure you again. Whoops, just kidding. What happened? I only put this one in here because I think it's amazing. These are taps that go on your sneakers. And this fitness program is basically like tap dancing, but it's new, it's scientifically proven, and there's a picture of a brain on it, so duh. And then finally, and this is also something to be careful of, the person is not a teacher, they're an alchemist. You are going to not just lose weight, but evolve with deep twists and big heart openers. Just saying. All right. Which one of those made you want to get off the couch? And if your answer was none of them, I want you to think about in your own life, what things make you get off the couch? Get off the couch, remember, is a metaphor for doing things that you should do, that once you get into it, you usually do like to do it. But it's one of those things where sometimes it gets pushed to the side. And even for reading teachers, or maybe especially for reading teachers, this is our reading too. You don't often get to read the books that are on your nightstand during the busy part of the school year. That gets pushed to the side because of other things that are creating busyness. You all don't often get to read the things that you want to read because you have a lot of things to read for work. And there's only so much reading you can do in a day. Now, you know it's good for you. You know you enjoy it when you get into it, but you're not making the time to do it even though you know you should. Same thing with eating healthier, exercising, all of these things. We know that if we find the right kind of exercise, we really enjoy it. If we find the right kind of healthy food, like I love carrots, but you know, sometimes it's just easier to reach for something else, or to turn on the television, or to, and not to bash television, I think it's awesome. Also, language exposure. But what are some of the things that make you get off the couch, or make you pick up your book, or make you put down the Doritos? Or have you guys tried those Takis that are showing up in the store now? I love those things, she says, sipping her protein shake.
All right, the chatter is good. The chatter is good. Um, yeah, I know some people are bringing up the social aspect of both exercising, right? Like I go to Zumba class because I have a good friend that goes to Zumba class, or yoga because one of my colleagues goes. So we a chance encounter, not that we're talking during yoga class, but just to see a friend and know you're going through a similar experience as you're about to die on the mat is really helpful. And so, you know, I was just asking because I was personally curious as well. You made the point about students really learning reading from peers. And so during distance learning, obviously that's an obstacle. So how can we leverage some sort of social interaction in our reading instruction while we're not sitting next to each other in the classroom? So I love the ideas that are coming in, you know, connecting online, videoing, you know, book reviews, book clubs, and still being able to maybe do a synchronous virtual meet. Yeah, workout buddies, just like reading buddies. That's so true. And that's some of the accountability too, but it makes it more, for me, palatable, I guess, because I would definitely rather be eating any sort of chip. What did you say? Takis, taquitos? I'm interested, whatever they are. I'd rather be doing that in front of the couch.
Yeah, right? Fun. Yeah, so I think peers are a really big part of it. The number one reason why adults report buying a book is because somebody recommended it. And the number one reason that they read the book they bought, because there's actually a pretty big difference there. We buy a lot of books that we don't read. As a society, we buy a lot of books that we don't read. I'm not talking about you. You read everything. But is because somebody recommended it to us that we trust. And or we want to be part of the conversation that people are having about it, and or somebody was talking about it, piqued your interest, so you opened it up. Reading, even for adults who are really good at it and know that they enjoy it and have no problem doing it, is a challenging cognitive activity. It requires the orchestration of lots of things, and it takes time. And there are lots of demands on our time and lots of things kind of competing for it. And so it's always an investment to read. It's not nothing. And the one thing that seems to push people over the edge in and outside of school is when peers or someone they really care about, which could be their teacher, recommend it or make them want to do it because you want to be like them, or you want to be part of the conversation with them. And that can be synchronous or not. So it could be reading buddies like, hey, let's get together and both of us be reading at 10 a.m. And what page are you on? But it also could be asynchronous, like, hey, I just finished this and I really enjoyed it. You would like it too. So organizing some kind of swapping books, or figuring out how they could be reading the same thing at the same time or at the same time of day, and checking in with each other about those things. It doesn't have to be the same book. It doesn't have to be the same time, but there has to be an opportunity for interaction and for part of that experience to be shared, because in order to get that peer benefit, which seems to be really important. Dick Allington used to say that kids learn to read with a little help from their friends and sometimes their teachers. And I think what he meant was that proximal model of somebody who's not an expert reader, but who's one step ahead of them and who invites them into the reading club, like, hey, I want to be a reader too because my friend is a reader, or because I want to be like my older sister who's a reader, or because I want to be thought of as X kind of person. A lot of reading behaviors are wrapped up in identities, being seen with a book, being seen as someone who holds a certain book, being seen as somebody who knows certain things. And so if reading is primarily an identity activity, identities are social and we need social support for them. So we need some people around us. not necessarily physically right next to us, but around us in mind when we're doing our reading work. What else is popping up for folks? What gets you off the couch? Fear, guilt, self-loathing.
Yeah, lots of people have brought up, scheduling and time management.
Yep.
I think your analogy holds true too, obviously with, the peer models, the person that's one step ahead of you, right? Like you go to the gym, your workout buddy is probably not like an NFL player or like the master on the cover of Fitness magazine, but your workout buddy's maybe is somebody like one step ahead of you because you want to aspire and they really push you and they push you in the right way. And so, yeah, sorry, I keep going back to the chatter here. Oh, the Apple Watch, the rings, because it's a personal goal setting.
Ah, yes, the rings. Okay, this is big, and it actually, and it's going to come up in a slide that I'll show you in a second here. This is the personal goal setting is important. In academic research, we call it self-regulated reading behaviors. The personal goal setting is important because having a goal is important, but if you set it, it's more important. And the reason is not just because we're self-centered and think we're important, but because we set goals that we probably can meet. And when somebody on the outside sets them, there is a question about whether we can meet them or not. And depending on what kind of confidence you have or under or overconfidence you have, you might think that goal is not worthy or that you are not worthy of the goal or you're not sure. And so it's not as motivating as one that, that you set. The other thing that's great about those rings is that it's not how well you did, it's that you did it. And so this is another thing that's important if you're doing a reading program that has tracking involved. It's not that you did this book in this amount of time or this many pages or this many books, because honestly, reading one book that changes your life is better than reading two that you don't remember. Reading 100 pages that you were really engaged with is better than reading 200 that you barely even noticed went by. So a lot of these metrics that we tend to use aren't actually the meaningful one. There's the surface level one that's easy to measure that stands in for some of the more meaningful things that we actually care about. And so if we have goals that measure effort rather than goals that measure ability or metrics like number of pages, number of minutes, number of books, did you attempt to read every day or 5 days of the week, or did you attempt to read at least blah, blah, and blah? Did you talk about something you read with a family member every day this week? Those are closer to what we actually care about, what actually drives the growth, than counting the number of pages. So setting goals about just getting moving and making sure that you get moving every day is better than setting the goal that you run a 5K every day,
All right, and Hannah has a great question too. Can you say a little bit more about self-regulated reading behaviors?
Yeah, so there's a good website about self-regulated strategy development. It's a whole set of strategies for writing specifically, but it's built on the idea that self-regulation is really important for strategic activity. So, and part of that has to do with being aware that you are using strategies to do things. And part of that has to do with students being really good self-motivators and intrinsic motivation being more powerful in all of the ways than extrinsic motivation. And the reason for that is that it's multidimensional. So if you want to do it, you bring more resources to the task than if you are incentivized to do it with an outside incentive. And with summer reading programs, this is a pretty stark reality. Do you remember how they used to do that Pizza Hut thing? Like, that's cool, right? I don't want to knock the Pizza Hut thing because a lot of people read for the Pizza Hut thing. But really what they were reading for might have been the recognition that came along with the Pizza Hut thing, and or proving to their parents that they could, and or not being the only one in their friend group that didn't get the pizza, or not being the only sibling that didn't get it. There are a lot of kind of other things that are competing for somebody linking pizza with a book. And the pizza book connection is not only nonsensical, it's actually not one we want to reinforce, because if that were true, then English majors would be, I don't know. Anyway, so if instead it's an intrinsic thing, like I really, really want to know more about a place that I want to visit at the end of the summer, and I'm reading everything I can find about it, I'm going to read more and understand more, and so all of these other factors in terms of motivation, engagement, comprehension, fluency, and volume, and practice, and exposure, all of those are going to be more activated than if I'm reading in order to get pizza. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the measure of whether you get your pizza is whether your parent signs the thing that says how many pages. And so you can get there pretty quickly. And it's really just about the pages. But as we said before, like the pages never mattered. See what I mean? So self-regulation is mostly about teaching kids to set their own goals. And the self-regulated strategy development is about making sure they understand what their strategies are and are selecting them as they go, so that they can hold themselves accountable for using them for good reasons, instead of being told, make a prediction here, outline your paper now. You know, when you're told to do it, it doesn't integrate into a whole system that supports itself, the way we talked about in the beginning. All right, let me zoom through a couple of things that I want to leave you with, and then we'll come back to some of the questions here. I wish, it's not true right now, but I wish that swimsuit season meant, hooray, beaches. Often it doesn't mean that. Often it means like there is a lot of work ahead of us. We are going to have a little bit of self-loathing involved. We are going to have to force ourselves to do things we don't want to do. But what I would love for it to be is like, is like what it is for my daughter, who isn't old enough yet to understand that swimsuit season means she should feel self-conscious. She thinks it is just pure joy. So if it was going to be summer reading, you guys, no assignments, just pure reading joy, here are some things that we know work. Book distribution programs. Meta-analysis of all studies of programs that distribute books to kids during the school year and outside the school year. Book distribution programs universally have a small to medium effect size. Part of that is because if you want kids to be reading books, not reading anything, but reading books, they have to have books they can and want to read. And the likelihood that they have books they can and want to read right now at this very moment is smaller than normal, because we don't currently have access to libraries, and we don't often have access to brick and mortar bookstores. And Amazon 2-day shipping is sometimes a little longer than 2 days. So book distribution programs, and perhaps we should call them redistribution programs, like swapping and sharing, do work, and we're investing in some of those at UConn with Jen's district, with another partner in New Haven, and with another partner in New London. We're trying to get more and more books, especially for itty bitties who like read all the books in their house and then memorize them and need to have some more text around. Book distribution programs are important. So if you're going to invest in one thing, especially at this moment in time, investing in ways to get text into kids' hands is important. And if you think it's not the book that matters, but text that matters, investing in ways to get more text in front of kids in whatever format, thinking about magazines and newspapers and letters and newsletters and notes back and forth and pen pals and all of those things, those programs work. Self-selected voluntary reading works. That's why summer reading beats summer school in terms of effect size. People never believe me when I say that, but it's been replicated more than once. And at the end, I have a link to a Google Drive folder that will take you to some of the studies that say this, that demonstrate this. When kids choose books that they can and want to read and read them at high volumes, which they tend to do because they chose them, they learn more than summer school. And that shouldn't be a surprise to us, because summer school is forced attendance. It's not forced engaged reading. It's forced sitting through a lesson. It's not engaged reading. It might be forced sustained silent reading, but it's not necessarily engaged reading, and nothing beats engaged reading. And one of the easiest ways to get there is to make sure kids have access to texts that they can and want to read, and then, let them read them. Summer reading programs work. So when we have some meta-analyses in that folder that say like summer reading programs in general across all of them have a small or moderate effect size, and that is not a typo, it's an if and only if. We learned that from my math friends. They create a sense of community. So if your summer reading program involves some kind of reading with or along with family members, discussing with family members, classmates, or community, they reward effort, not necessarily achievement. So it's not you get a prize for reading 100 pages, but you get a prize for basically for showing up, for reading each day, or for reading each week, or for writing about something you read, or for talking about it in a little Flipgrid thing, whatever it is, but it's for showing up to your literate task. That does not make sense in English, but they manageably track progress. Which means they're tracking progress, so letting kids see their progress, which is good for their self-determination there. So like your Apple Watch gives you a ring that closes, that kids see like, hey, I made it to my first goal and my second goal, but that those goals are not so far ahead that it's actually discouraging for them to even be thinking about them. The goals are manageable and they're able to meet them and see their progress and see cool badges appearing even for very small things. This is the logic behind TripAdvisor. Do you remember TripAdvisor in the beginning? You would get badges for like your first review, you get a badge. Your fifth review, you get a badge. And then it starts to spread out a little bit because they figure you're pretty good at doing this reviewing thing. You don't need a high five every minute. You need a high five for your 10th and your 50th and your 100th. And then you're a superstar reviewer. And people get really caught up in that. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a superstar reviewer. But we want them to be manageable so that people want to keep getting them. So you don't want a kid to wait all summer to get their first badge. And then choice, obviously. Personalization, this doesn't have to be to the person because we're not really great judges of what kids want to read, but they are, which is why Children's Choice Awards and Teacher's Choice Awards are often not the same. And that's okay. And so personalizing by grade band or by interest area is great. Making assumptions about gender is dumb. Making assumptions about reading level, also dumb. But other types of sort of gearing kids towards certain choices is helpful. Nudges and reminders help. We know this from subscription programs. So programs where you get mailed a book every month, the day that it arrives, you are the most likely to read it. Same thing with magazines. Same thing with letters. And so part of that is because of the like newness factor and because it came just for you. But part of it is also that lots of things happen during the summer. And if you left school super just hyped up about summer reading, like 6.5 weeks later, other things are on your mind. And so nudges and reminders do help. The other thing that matters is reading for a reason. And so this is something that is tough to incorporate in a summer reading program, but I'm going to show you an example and Carolyn Vandal's going to roll her eyes because she knows about this example. And thank you for telling me about it. But reading for a reason totally matters because it makes it so that you are reading not just to get your prize or not just to log your hours, but in order to learn something. And that supports engagement much better than an incentive tied to pizza, which has nothing to do with reading. Last thing, multiple summers matters. So when we're thinking about summer reading, we don't want to just be thinking about this summer, we want to be thinking about the long term. Partly because sometimes you don't see the effect of a summer reading program in a single summer, it's the accumulation of summers. And also because we're thinking about this laying a foundation for the habit and the experience of reading over the summer being an experience kids want to revisit and a habit that they've built that they can continue to build on. So if this isn't a summer where they like read all the books ever, that's fine. Reading development is not linear. We have phases of being really into it and phases of not being into it, just like adults have phases about like really, really exercising, not exercising, really reading all the time and really not reading all the time. We don't need them to always grow 1,000,000 levels every single summer. We want to take the long game here, but want to design programs where they have the opportunity to make a lot of growth, are not penalized for not making growth, and if they don't make huge amounts of growth in one summer, they've had a good enough experience that they're not at a disadvantage when they show up for next summer because they're like, oh, summer reading, that was horrible. I felt so bad about myself. Think about how this works with exercise, folks. And finally, the way we measure matters. If we're measuring by, do you come back to school loving reading? We will structure summer reading differently than if we measure by, well, how many words correct per minute can you read? Or did dibbles go up? Or is your F&P level higher? Or the way we measure what happens matters. So we want to think about what kind of growth we're after, because that changes what kind of practice, what kinds of things kids are reading, what kinds of exposure, what sorts of vocabulary actually counts. Kids are always learning new words. Are they learning new words that show up in school? Yes or no? And what kinds of reading count? So the one example is actually an example that I'm going to open up so that you can see it, and then I'll stop talking because it's 9:05. It's an example from the New Canaan Library system, and I heard about this because a reading specialist that I've worked with in that area mentioned their library's program, and I looked into it and I thought, wow, we've got some really cool things happening here in terms of one of many examples of a multifaceted personalized approach. So we've got badges, right? For very small intervals, like we talked about. We also got activity badges. So it's not just about reading entire books, but also finding some artwork, doing something outside, working with your family, that kind of thing. I don't think there's anything magical about any individual one of these. It's just kind of magical that there is acknowledgement of different ways of using the things that you read. And then you can take your badges and stick them on this cool map and decide as a family on rewards every time you get to a new destination. And you can pick rewards that are meaningful for you, that your family can and wants to do, because if you were like me with the Pizza Hut thing and I don't eat the cheese and I don't eat the gluten, then like the Pizza Hut thing, not exactly exciting for me. So you can pick your own destinations that make sense. And so there's a little bit of self-determination there. And it doesn't have all the things that you could possibly dream up if you were making your own sort of perfect program, but it has many of the things. So if you're looking for an example, this is one that I know about that seems to be picking up on a few of the things that we care about at once. So there's that. I'm going to close this so I can see everybody a little bit bigger. No, close this so I can see everybody a little bit bigger. All right.
Wow, that was awesome. I have to give a shout out here before we close to Elizabeth for that. She just shared this awesome idea like Grubhub, but Book Hub. And so she dropped off graphic novels to her students to their house. And it was sort of like a secret underground book exchange during the school year as well. So cool, right? And that really like prioritizes reading as being like super cool and secret. I love that. I think that's a fabulous idea. Yes, Elizabeth, I might borrow that. Thank you. So Rachel, that gave us so much to think about. Just thank you for your words of wisdom and your inspiration. I think it makes us sort of reframe thinking about distance learning and everything the last 2.5 months has made us experience, and then thinking ahead to next year, and that panic and anxiety already starts to set in, and we're not even really in summer yet. So really just reframing what it means and what kids should be doing during the summer and how we can support them in that. I just thought that was incredible. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you to everyone for attending. You will see a video recording of this on ctreading.org in the next couple of days and on our YouTube channel. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer, but I also hope you're coming back next Tuesday. You'll see an invite coming out for the fabulous Kate and Maggie Roberts to close out our 3-part series on a Tuesday night. Rachel, that was just fantastic in every way. So thank you so much for everything that you do for our organization and for educators across the state and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being with us.
All right. Good night, guys. Thank you.
It's like watching the countdown on New Year's Eve.
I was losing my internet there for a minute.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, I feel a lot better because I was like really stressed out about summer.